What's up? What's up, witches? Hey, Jasmine. How are you, my dear? Hey, Kitty Eddie. Good afternoon and blessed be. Thanks for being here, you guys. Welcome to another recording of a season 3 episode for the BetterWitch podcast. I am Allie, your host, aka BronxWitch. And I'm super excited today for our conversation because we are going to be talking all about using your zodiac sign and tapping into your personal power from a zodiac perspective for your craft. And we have probably the best individual coming to talk with us about that today. I can see that Ivo is already in our green room waiting for us. Very prompt and timely. Thank you so much, Ivo. You are a bit early, which is absolutely fantastic. You just get to watch all of this sort of annoying behind the scenes admin stuff. Thumbs up. Okay, that's all right with you. Cool. So we're going to do a couple of things. And then I'll bring you into the stream room here and we'll get into our chat. Hi, Smokey. That's totally fine. Can't stay the whole time. No worries. Jasmine says, thank you so much for putting me onto Black Herman. It's been a pleasure learning more. Yes. And hopefully you guys got my email. If you're on my mailing list, the Black Herman books just came in today. So we are waiting for the candles and prayer cards from Brother Moses, who reports that I should have them shipped out by next week. So we're thinking by the end of the month, folks who have already pre-ordered candles, prayer cards, and bundles will be getting those. If you have ordered a copy of Black Herman's book by itself, that is available and those orders are shipping now. So go ahead and grab a copy of his book. And you can also get a free PDF version of his book in the BronxWitch HQ online portal as well. This is something that Brother Moses has put together for us, which is really wonderful and kind of him. And so if ordering is not possible for you right now, you can still call home some of Black Herman's magic with a free PDF of his book, Black Herman's Secrets of Mysteries, Magic Mysteries, and Legerdemain. So definitely check that out. So welcome, guys. If you are new here, then please know that you are on the clock. You are my unpaid employees. You are my show producers, okay? So we like to take this time before we get started on the conversation to make sure all is well. Please do let me know if you can hear me okay, if you can see me okay. For those of you who cannot stick around for the entire stream, I encourage you to drop your questions into the chat, or you can drop them into the Q&A box, which is at the top of the chat if you are tuning in on YouTube. There is a box where you can drop your questions to make sure we don't miss them. For those of you who are able to stick around, we will be taking questions towards the end of our chat, so you can always hold on to them, or you can drop them into the chat for us. Sound is A1. Thank goodness. We've had some bumps along the road this season, but I think we got all of those ironed out, and I made sure to do a little check beforehand, which is good. Okay. Oh, did I get that wrong? Is it Kiteri? You like Kitieri? Okay, I like Kitieri too. But thanks for correcting me. Okay, cool. All right, so it sounds like the sound is good and all is well. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys our intro info on our guest host today. So let's get into that. What's up, witches? Welcome to season 3 of the Better Witch podcast, presented by the Beyond BronxWitch YouTube channel. I'm your host, Alysha Kravetz. I'm a tarot reader, Reiki master, and owner of BronxWitch HeadQuarters, a spiritual shop and workshare space in the Bronx, New York. This season, I'll be coming to you every week with a new topic and a new guest co-host to share our real-life experiences as practicing witches. Because when we know better, we witch better. Today's guest co-host is Ivo Dominguez Jr. Ivo has been active in the Wiccan community and the pagan community since 1978. Ivo is a founding member and former high priest of Keepers of the Holy Chalice, the first assembly of the Sacred Wheel Coven. He currently serves as one of the elders of the ASW. Ivo is the author of The Four Elements of the Wise, Keys to Perception, a practical guide to psychic development, Practical Astrology for Witches and Pagans, Casting Sacred Space, and Spirit Speak. He is the anchor author of the new 12-book Witches Sun Sign series. In his mundane life, he has been a computer programmer, the executive director of an AIDS HIV service organization, a bookstore owner, and more. All right. So excited to have Ivo with us. Let's go ahead and bring him into the room. Hello,
Hey,
Ivo. Welcome. How are you?
doing good. Glad to be here.
Oh, good. It is so wonderful to see you. These moments in particular are really trippy for me because there are some folks that I feel like I've grown up with. I feel like I've seen for, a long time
Right.
around. I've had the pleasure of reading your words and all of the insights that you have shared. You're definitely a prominent and notable member of the community. So it's really an honor and super exciting for me to get to be able to actually see you, even though it's probably kind of weird and parasocial because I feel like I know you already. And you probably get that quite a bit with folks who've been reading your works for so many years.
Yeah, but I think it kind of goes both ways because it's not like you're not all over social media. So, I have an impression of you based on what I see on Instagram and whatever. So anymore, that's kind of become kind of a norm that people tend to meet each other that way, and then they meet
Yeah.
in real life sooner or later.
Yeah, yeah,
This
it
is like
is.
this is like 3/4 of the way to real life.
It is, yeah, and it's so freaky too because some of us online obviously have different names than our given names, or other identities even, and so it's really funny because I have this whole Rolodex of folks in my head, but half of them I know by their Instagram handles. So a
Right.
lot of times I meet people and I'm like, "Oh,
Oh,
hi, witch of
yeah.
so and so," and I'm like, "I imagine you have another name. Who are you?" So
You
it's
probably
really
wanna use
funny.
in this context.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it's funny. With me, 'cause people are like, "Are you BronxWitch? Are you Allie? What do I call you?" And I'm like, anyone is fine.
Right.
But so welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
I was looking forward to this,
Yeah,
and,
same.
because of your lovely contribution to Leo Witch.
Yes, thank you
Yeah,
so much. I That's actually perfect because that was the first thing I wanted to tell people. I wanted to say, in full disclosure,
right.
I'm incredibly biased towards Evo and the Sun Sign series in particular, because I was given the incredible honor of being asked to contribute to the Leo Witch book, which was so fantastic. Thank you so much for thinking of me and including me. Personally, my sun sign, I think, is something that I embody quite a bit. And I show up as a Leo in the world, I think, at least in my sort of understanding of what people might expect from a Leo. So it really
Absolutely.
meant a lot to be able to just, add my thoughts to the Leo book because I do kind of wear that pretty proudly. So thank you so
I
much.
think I think you really do because when a Leo is actually doing what a Leo is supposed to be doing, it's not about being in the spotlight, it's not about them. It's like the sun in the sky, right? You're supposed to live a life that fills the world with light. You lead by example if you're doing
Mhm.
Leo right.
Yeah.
And honestly, being authentic, being yourself, being out in the world is what a Leo does when they're doing the right way. And
Yeah.
honestly, that's kind of the thing about all the sun signs. The more we lead with our core self, then the more we're given. The more energy we have, the more success we have, the more capacity we have to bounce back when things go sideways.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's and I was really glad that you said yes because it was a rush job getting out. So here's a real world problem nowadays, right?
Yeah. Tell
These
us.
these 12 books had to be, and I've got a whole bunch of them here, had to be created really fast because if all they got created in 14 months, which is
Wow.
insane.
Yeah.
Because if
It
word
can
had
take that much for one book, is
if
my
word had gotten
understanding.
out
Yeah.
about the series, Llewellyn, my publisher, was absolutely sure, and they're right, that somebody would have said, "Oh, this is a cool idea. Let's pump it into an AI and produce 12 books in 1 month before there's any chance for any of the other ones to be written." So
Wow.
nowadays, if it's an idea that makes sense, then you have to work fast or work in secret, because if somebody hears about it, then suddenly there's a knockoff. There have been several knockoff versions of these books already since it was cat out of the bag when it was first announced. So yeah, AI is a kind of a dangerous thing for our community,
Mhm.
and it's not even about the economics; it's about bad information.
Yeah.
And a lack of spiritual insight, because the AI can't do that. It can
Right.
compile information, but it can't do the rest. But the other bit is I desperately wanted your voice and everybody else's voice, because my job in the series was round people up, and
Mhm.
I write about half of each book, and I do like kind of like the hardcore astrology part.
Mhm.
But really, people understand things better when they see it as it plays out in people's lives.
Yes.
So the rest of the voices in each of the books are people of that sign talking about their own life experience as a witch of that sign. And that
Yeah.
way it clicks, because you've got the theory and the abstract stuff, and then, oh, this is what it looks like when the person's walking on the earth and living their life.
Yes, yeah, I love that so much. I think maybe that's really why the project resonated with me so much when I was told about it, because that's really the basis
Mhm.
of this podcast.
Yeah.
Is that we have real life conversations with
Mhm.
practicing witches about how they have gone on their journeys in a particular topic or learning about a particular area of the craft.
Yeah.
Because we can read all the books and we can watch all of the how tos, but this is really where a lot of our elders and our ancestors really emphasized learning face to face with a teacher, and because there are
Mhm.
those little tidbits and those little things that really come from hearing about someone's actual experience with the material, with a
Mhm.
spell, with an herb, that can't always be captured
Mhm.
when we are just sort of like providing foundational information. So that's what we do here, rather than sort of like a you know tell us how you do this kind of thing. We talk about what was this like in your life and everything
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
And that's what we're going to do today. So I'll back up just a little bit,
Sure, sure, sure.
just to let you know how the conversation here works. We are streaming live to my
Mhm.
YouTube channel. Hello to the Beyond BronxWitch YouTube family, all of the witches that are watching, and this is a behind the scenes. So everyone knows that we are, in admin mode, which means if you get a doorbell ring or need to step away or there's some noise in the background, don't worry about that. We'll be able to edit that out for the podcast version that gets aired in a few weeks. But folks who watch on the YouTube channel actually
Mhm.
like all the behind the scenes stuff. So they're
Better.
here. Yeah, they're here to get the nitty gritty, before it
Yeah,
gets all
yeah.
cleaned up, what went down. We'll also have a Q&A segment at the end of our chat today that is just exclusive for our YouTube folks. So for our podcast listeners, they are encouraged to subscribe to this YouTube channel and tune into these lives so that they too can get their questions answered by our guest co-host. And once the episode is ready for air on podcast, this recording is available always. It's available now on my YouTube channel. But the audio version on podcasts, I'll certainly send you a link and information so you can share that with folks too. And that should be ready in just a few weeks. But I think the most important thing to know about being our guest co-host is we take that pretty seriously. So you are encouraged to steer the conversation however you'd like. Feel free to talk over me, interrupt. If there's something you want to talk about that I haven't, prefaced with a question or anything like that, go ahead and jump in and share your thoughts. It's important that you be heard, and any insights that you want to share with our audience, that you get the opportunity to do so. So feel free at any time to jump in.
Okay.
All right, good stuff. So, we really kind of started talking about the heart of the
Mhm.
conversation
Yeah.
already, talking a little bit about how the series got put together and what the idea behind this was, and why you and Llewellyn chose to go with this approach of having you as the anchor author, but including other voices into the conversation. And I think that's really awesome. So I'd like to kind of lean into that a little bit more, and talk a bit about what led you to want to focus on isolating each sun or sign, or each zodiac sign rather, for personal power in the first place, because it is definitely unique. And I am glad you got to it before AI did.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, first I'm going to say I have a huge, well-known hidden agenda. And for years, like my not so hidden agenda has been, I'd like to get more witches to have at least enough astrology under their belt so that they can make use of it as a tool. So you'll always see me trying to push astrology one way or another, because I think it's so useful for magical folks of any kind. So that's kind of like the first piece of it. But the other part is, and I mentioned it near the beginning of the book. When people first encounter astrology, they learn their sun sign, if that's the only thing that they know. And truthfully, it's way more complicated than that when you're actually doing readings for people or looking somebody's life. But here's the part that's the same for every single person. Wherever the sun is, that represents the color, the flavor, the texture of your divine spark, of where the light is entering into you. When you moved down into this body and became incarnated and got out onto the planet, the place in you that's lit up, that's just like the sun in the heavens, feeds the plants, that makes the oxygen, that feeds the animals, that keeps the whole earth going. The sun sign tells you what the kind of power source is. Now, you have all the other planets and all the other signs. We're made out of everything, all the elements, all the signs, all the planets, but you are lit up by that. So when you tap into your power, whether that is psychological power, magical power, whatever, the battery supply and the generator are labeled Leo, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, whatever, and that flavor stays with you your whole life. So it is kind of like, and the symbol for the sun in astrology is a circle with a dot in the center. Yeah, that little dot in the center is that spark inside of you. So you can think about it that way. So if you are a witch, when you reach for power, and maybe you're drawing it from the earth, maybe you're drawing it from plants, animals, crystals, the sky, the stars, the ancestors, everything. But like calls to like. You've probably heard that phrase a bazillion times. All right. The spark in you is Leo. So it's easier for you to immediately attract the attention of the universe in a Leo way.
Mm-hmm.
But we're witches, right? So we get to choose how we shape and use the power that we can access. And that also applies to whatever sign you are, because everybody knows that all 12 signs have their strengths and their frailties.
Right. And I like the way you put that, frailties. How nice and gentle. How nice and gentle. I really love listening to you describe that. It was such a beautiful way of putting what it is about your particular sun sign, your astrological makeup in general. It feels very similar to the way I describe it to my BetterWitch students, because in my 6-month magic intensive, one of the things that we do is we focus in on your astrological sign. I have everybody draw their birth charts. And the way I describe it is, this is your soup. These are the ingredients that kind of make up who you are in a cosmic sense. And we have many selves, as I see it, different bodies, different layers. We're like an onion is one of the analogies that I make. And our astrological selves is just one of the layers of that onion. And knowing the configuration of the cosmos at the moment that you kind of got plucked out of it gives you a lot of insight into your cosmic soup and what you are made out of. But I love that idea that your sun sign is that spark that light, that's going to, make your soup particularly different from
Mhm.
others,
Mhm.
as well as give some insight in sort of how you relate to the rest of the world as well, and how you show up
Mhm.
in the world. And I think the the thing to take away from what you just said is that your astrological makeup is a tool for you to
Mhm.
use,
Mhm.
especially as witches, because we recognize that we are energy, that all other things are energy. And really, all we're doing is identifying and isolating that energy, and then kind of shifting, moving, or working with it, to our benefit or to achieve a certain goal. And so,
Right.
our astrological energies are just another set of tools in that toolbox to be able to do that.
Oh, absolutely. And think of it this way, one of the first things that happens, like whether or not you use them as part of your main practice, pretty much everybody gets exposed to the idea of the four elements simply because it's all over the place and it shows up in a lot of different cultures.
Right.
And the biggest value in having things like the names for the four elements, and I'm going to add the idea of the planets and the signs as well, is that if you can name it, if you can conceptualize it, like you were talking about choosing and selecting which energy to tune into or focus it, then of course, if we have more names, it's like knowing more color names. It's kind of like if I say that I want something that's teal, that's way different than something that's chartreuse, right?
Right.
So that it's like going to from the small box of crayons to the big box of crayons, so that when you have a sense of this is what sun energy is, this is what Aries energy is, this is what Mars energy is, you have other names and other things to tune into and use those as words of power to summon and convey that energy into yourself or into the work you're doing. So it expands your vocabulary as a witch.
I love that. Expand your vocabulary. Yeah, it just gives you, a deeper understanding of who you are and how you relate to
Mhm.
the cosmos and the natural world. And I think it's really interesting that overlap as well,
Mhm.
too,
Mhm.
because, we have our astrological placements, which
Right.
are outside of Earth.
Mhm.
And then we have the natural elements, which in some systems it's four, and others it's six or seven.
Yeah.
But we have these components that we see the Earth world as being made up of, and it's so interesting how those overlap and interact. And I think that overlap is a really powerful way of looking at yourself as an individual on Earth, and
Mhm.
then kind of extrapolating, maybe is the word, and projecting that into the rest of the cosmos, because they might not, for the new witch, be really obvious how the two connect
Mhm.
to each other and how they overlap. And I think that's definitely one way to look at how they interact with each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that.
And I don't know any witch who doesn't encounter big, long charts of correspondences that this is an herb of this, a stone of that, and then there's a list of elements, planets, signs, gods, goddesses, all sorts of things that are connected to something.
Mhm.
And what I'm going to say is that the more a lot of times you just gloss over the ones that you don't know. Like,
Right.
what does it mean to be an herb of Saturn? I don't know. So you move on to the next thing that makes sense. Well, it's okay. It also says it's an earth herb, so I know what that means. So I'm going to go with that. But now it's almost like the difference between listening to music on, you know, a really like the throwaway earbuds that they give you on the airlines, as
Yeah.
opposed, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to
Yeah.
something that actually, hits the low notes, hits the high notes, really gives you stereo separation. It's like you get so much nuance when you actually can decipher the rest of it.
Yeah.
And all these things are, in back to what you were saying, is are ways of linking heaven and earth, right?
Hmm.
They're ways of linking heaven and earth, and we know we experience the physical world directly, so that by finding connections there, we can build a little bridge to the things that are above.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So many gems, you guys. I hope you're taking notes because you have a really beautiful way, Evo, of describing these things. I think in a way that's really eloquent and really poignant. And connecting heaven and earth is a really wonderful thing because I think for so many reasons, but I think one of the reasons that comes to me first off is there are, and I talk about this quite a bit with my witches, and there are certain words and certain concepts that have almost been kind of colonized, I guess,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word, by certain religious groups or spiritual traditions, even. And there are words like heaven, like
Hmm.
God, like prayer, that I think, especially as new witches stepping into the craft, that might feel unavailable to witches, or like they're somehow a part of something different. And I really like that you use the word heaven because witches have a concept of heaven as well, but you're kind of
Hmm.
using that term maybe in a different way than folks coming from a religious background might
Right.
use that kind
Right.
of terminology. And so, if you're wondering, guys, do witches believe in heaven? Yes, absolutely. But there may not be, a bearded robed figure
They
at
look
the
really
head of
different.
it.
They
It
look
might,
really different.
right. It might look a little bit different, but this idea that there is a world beyond our human existence that is bigger than us, and that is a place from which all energy kind of generates and
Hmm.
perhaps also returns after being
Hmm.
contained in a body for some period of time, is still a concept that witches hold dear. But oftentimes, when we use that terminology, we are sort of talking more of a cosmic
Absolutely.
heaven. We are talking more about what some people might call the ether, or
Hmm.
just the unending, vast well of energy that is out there and that is accessible to existence. And that gets siphoned off into different bodies and different frequencies and different usages, but that never goes anywhere. It just sort of transforms and changes. And I think for a lot of us, the cosmos is a very literal representation of that heaven,
Oh
which I
yeah.
think is a kind of a wild thing to think about.
I think the thing about words, and especially if we talk about whether things have been you know taken over by the overculture, let's put it
Hmm.
right.
Yeah.
Another way of saying colonizing things. It's We get to reclaim anything we want.
Yeah.
Just because somebody else has used it or changed it or made it the default that the overculture teaches, doesn't mean that it has to mean that for us. I mean, honestly, just choosing. I mean, when I first got involved, it was in the 70s, and choosing the word witch as an identity puts you immediately at odds. It still does to a great degree, but honestly, it was a little bit worse back then in that regard, because the first place that people's mind went was all the things that people had taught about witches for a very long time. And I'm not saying that everything can be reclaimed, but the seven heavens are ours. The old phrase seven heavens, that's the seven elder planets, the planet that we could see with our eyes were the seven spheres above, the seven planes above. I mean, it's our language. We can make up. I have a friend who is doing a lot of political magic, as one does when the world is in the situation it's in. And one of the struggles that she went through and then decided she was going to do it is she was going to put it on her altar to do some particular political work. And in the end, she finally said, "Well, I'm going to bleep myself out." She said, "F it," fill in the word long and loud. And she says, "I'm going to put a small American flag and a copy of the Constitution on my altar, not because it's what it should, because it's not what it should be now, but I know what I want it to be." So she added things to her altar because she felt weird about putting a flag on her altar because
Yeah.
you have all the feelings, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
yes, but I want that to be my flag, not their flag.
Yeah.
So, not your mileage will vary, but figure out which things you want to repurpose, reclaim, or rehabilitate
Mhm.
for your purposes. And
Mhm.
honestly, I was raised, I was born in Cuba, came over when I was 3 years old, was raised Cuban Catholic, and I will say that there was a lot of useful magic involved, though they didn't like calling it that.
Right, right. Yes.
But a lot of it I had to like sort through which ideas make sense, which words I still use, and which are immediately triggering. And if something's
Mhm.
triggering you right now, maybe it won't be triggering you in 5 years or 10 years. But depending upon where you are in your process and your journey of claiming an identity as a witch or magical person, or forming some kind of truce with the your culture or family of origin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That I think that's really helpful for witches to keep in mind, specifically about the witch identity,
Hmm.
because that is something I think in interviews that I've done and things like that. That's probably like the number one question immediately. It's like, why do you call yourself a witch? What does that mean? And I always have to give sort of the like
Yeah.
not so fun but very true answer, which is, well, just know that what it means to me is different for every single witch, and it's one of the words that's maybe the hardest that I can think of to really like nail down one definition for, because it is a word that we are reclaiming, which means each one of us is coming to this word from a very different perspective. And
Hmm.
as you mentioned, growing up with a Cuban background, there were probably lots of practices that you
Hmm.
would look at and say, I think that's witchcraft.
Absolutely.
Right. But that people would not want to associate with that terminology because of some of the negative
Right.
history with that word and the way that it's been, weaponized against a lot of practices and groups of
Mhm,
people.
mhm.
And I'm diverging a little bit off of the topic of zodiac witch, but I guess it's half of that, right? We're talking about the
Good.
zodiac and we're talking about being witches.
It's all
So
good.
yeah, so I would love to hear your thoughts on why you identify as a witch, because I know that for new witches, that might be one of the biggest moments for
Mhm,
them. I get a
mhm,
lot of my students
mhm.
asking, well, I don't want anyone to know, or am I still a witch if I don't call myself that publicly? And things of that nature. So I think it's helpful for folks to hear different witches talk about whether or not they identify as a witch, and if so, why they choose to do so. And I'm curious as to what that journey's been like for you.
Um, I'm gonna say I was one of those kids that had psychic experiences and saw dead people and stuff from very early on, so it was never a question about, would I eventually end up doing some kind of magic or dealing with or some kind of spiritual work, because my lived experience from the time I was a kid was like, I have to make sense of these experiences, right? So I did
Right.
a lot of exploring, and I explored other religions outside of Christianity. I read a lot of different books, um, that I was privileged in the following sense. Even though my family of origin and I parted ways when I was 18, and I got kind of kicked out of the family. Um, my dad was a professor at a university, so I had access to books at the university's library that I probably wouldn't have had access to as a teenager in most places. So I would sit at the library for hours just reading all sorts of books on mysticism and astrology and masonry and ceremonial magic and all that kind of stuff. And for the longest time, I thought, well, I guess I'm going to end up being some kind of magician because that's the only stuff I was finding. But I was also a kid that spent as much time as they could outdoors under a tree. I was always more comfortable outside, and especially near a tree. And it's like I'm more connected to the natural world than I am I love ideas, I love books, but I was more connected to natural powers and staring at the sky and looking at the clouds. And so that I was drawn to the word witch because of A, more I felt it more in my connection to nature, and B, because on some level, the biggest thing that I always like, something's wrong when I was even though if it's right for you, it's right for you. But when I was reading those other kinds of paths about those other kind of paths, and I hadn't met a practitioner yet because I was a teenager, right? And mostly you don't get to meet ceremonial magicians until you're out in the world, right? But what I found was that I was more interested in working directly with people and my community. And witchcraft has always had a more of a community basis and root. And even in communities or cultures where the witch was sort of an outcast, but the idea was like, yes, but that's our witch. And when they needed something, they would go to the witch for a reading or a healing or something or other. And there's a witch from Spain, from Galicia, really, or Maria Solinas, and she was actually. And if you don't know her real story, the short part. And by the way, everybody tells a different version, and there have been fistfights over what the right story is. But
As always.
here's the one that I believe, right? And this is the part the historical record will support as well. She was tried and convicted by the Spanish Inquisition, but she was
Mm.
not put to death, and she didn't renounce being a witch. She was put under house arrest for the rest of her life.
Wow.
Now part of that was because her family had some money, which
She was
always,
like the Martha Stewart of witch convicts.
but there's another reason. Apparently, she was a kick-ass weather witch, and on several occasions, which she had called up storms to drown the Vikings that were raiding the shores of northwestern Spain, and the English that were coming to attack. So that she was like, okay, we may need her again the next time. We have her call up a storm, and she can do that from her home just as well. Though in the end, there's a story about her leaving her house near the end of her life, walking into the ocean, and just continuing to walk until she was gone, and basically returning to the sea. But the point was, witches are more engaged in the world than other kinds of magical paths or traditions that I could see. And I always wanted to be more engaged with the world and with people. And you're right, everybody's definition of witch is personal, unique, and people can argue forever about, well, historically, this is how it's defined. And in this tradition, I don't care. For me, the biggest thing is witches feel the magic flow in their bodies.
Yeah.
We
Wow.
feel it.
Yeah. And that will, first of all, shout out to that story, because that is such a classic example of, like, they'll put you down until like they can use you. And so it's like, well, we don't want her to like not help us out or whatever. So so that's really I think very like emblematic of like the witch's experience, or it's like you're being publicly ousted or tried, but secretly the town clergy's wives are sneaking to you in the nighttime to get their situations handled. Yeah. So that's really interesting, because that's very much what you would expect. But I think also a real like commentary on how witches end up being viewed in their society or become a part of their society, because it does seem to me that being a witch goes hand in hand with a life of service.
Yes.
So that has been a focus for me. But sometimes I have wondered, like, is that just me? And I have come here in order to walk that walk, or is it something? So it's kind of like a chicken before the egg kind of thing. Am I a witch because I came here to be of service and this is how I am being of service? Or is it that because I was interested in witchcraft and worked on developing my skills in those areas, that inevitably you kind of start serving the public because you have these skills that are useful not only to yourself and maybe to your immediate loved ones, but to anyone really who might find themselves without something or dealing with illness that they can't address with conventional methods, or whatever the case may be. And I don't know if there's an answer to that, but it's definitely something to think about. And perhaps our zodiac placements kind of shine light on that, because there's a lot of service in my chart that kind of says, nothing in the chart says, Allie, you're going to be a witch. But when you look at all of these different elements of the different placements that I have, they kind of come together to make up exactly what it is I'm doing in my life right now.
Yeah, I mean, the chart can. So here's the thing I always tell people about what your birth chart is like. So nowadays we have a lot of technology for taking somebody's DNA and looking at their genome, and guessing at where their ancestors came from, and also guessing at which, now it's getting better over time, but guessing at whether or not there are particular illnesses or particular strengths that may be innate with that combo, right? Nobody's DNA is going to tell you the nature of their soul, right? Or their spirit. The birth chart does not tell you what your soul or spirit is like. However, it does give you a readout of your energy DNA. So it gives you which kinds of traits, which kinds of sensitivities, good and bad, are present. But how you use that is the same way that how you're using the genetics you were given. And are there, like, my friend Iris Gonzalez, brilliant human being. She had she became a doctor, but she had the choice of either being a doctor or full scholarship to Juilliard, because she's got perfect pitch and incredible music, etc. So she picked doctoring because ultimately she figured she would do more good that way. But here's the thing: you can get really good at identifying pitch by training, but if you're born with perfect pitch, it's a blessing and a curse. She and my husband's father also had perfect pitch. Here's the thing: they can tune a guitar, a piano, a violin by ear. They could open their mouth and say, "Sing A sharp for me." Out it comes, right? However, that meant that every time that they listened to any of us sing, we're listening to music on the radio, and it was slightly off. Guess what? It's like pain.
It's like excruciating.
So the sensitivity is a gift, and it's also a big challenge. So what I'm saying is that your energy chart, if you will, the birth chart is like an energy chart, tells you a lot about your aura, tells you a lot about magical potentials, the things that you're going to be easier or harder to do, or so that but it does not say the nature of who chose to step into that body and walk this walk on the planet.
Wow. Right.
So still got your free will. Just like, knowing your genetics is helpful, like especially nowadays that we can figure out there's certain genes that give you certain cancer possibilities, yada, yada. And also it's good to know that what you make of it is about what you summon, what you invoke, what you call forth. And it's apply your witchcraft to the energy of your chart, and you can do more because you're not going to be fighting against what you have. You're going to be figuring out how to embrace it.
Right. How to work with it. I heard someone say once that a weed is just a plant that you don't know how to use yet, right? So I think that that's very much the case for all of the different aspects that make up who we are. That oftentimes it's not that, because when we talk about astrology, sometimes people can get really pigeonholy and like, oh, this is bad, or this is not a good sign, or I can't date anyone born under this sign, or what have you, and really what they are tools like anything else that you can use in different ways. And if you are able to identify what those are, then you can work with them. And you'll work with them differently depending on their constituents, what they're all about, or how they contribute to your life, or what have you. But none of them are bad per se or good per se. They're really about how you use them to your benefit.
Let me give you an example of misused astrology. So once upon a time, about 45 years ago, a little more than 45 years ago, actually, Jim and I met. He's my husband, and my friend did a chart comparing my chart and his chart, and said, "Oh well, this is going to be really exciting. It's going to be so much fun, lots of sparks, and then it's going to go boom and crash and burn." And I give it like 6 months.
Okay.
And so this past February, just a couple of months ago, was our 45th anniversary. So
Wow.
I guess,
Congratulations.
but here's the part that was right about her assessment comparing our two charts. And here's what they misunderstood. So here's the problem and the gift. our charts are set up so that our Saturns are almost an exact square to each other. There's some other things going on. So basically, I see in sharp relief and contrast all his faults, and he sees all my faults. Now,
Mm,
initially, there could be some fun friction in the early days of romance where we're so different in some ways. But over time, if you can work through it, then you end up polishing each other and you become more like gems instead of sharp-edged rocks.
right.
So that making the choice of understanding that, oh, it's actually a gift that he actually sees all my stuff and I see all his stuff. And if we can live through this, then we are both going to end up being better people. So when people say, "Oh, I can't date that sign. I've had a couple of really bad experiences," chances are there's probably something in your chart that makes that your personal shadow zone around particular kinds of behaviors or perspectives on the world and whatnot. I mean, honestly, the though there are indicators in charts about things like that, the big thing is you are so many things. Oh, so many things all at once. Honestly, you're like I said at the beginning, you're all 12 signs. You have all the planets in your chart, yada yada. And the more but if you identify piece by piece what each of those mean, it's how many traditions have as one of their core things, know thyself. Self-examination, examine your life, do your work. Well, this is one more set of tools, and you end up getting the benefit of making some cool magic with it too.
Yeah, I feel like that astrology projection or prediction that you received is probably super accurate, maybe for two folks that are not witches, and
And we're
probably
both
would
witches.
read right and would read perfectly accurately for the average everyday person who has those same astrological placements and makeup,
Mhm,
but don't necessarily know how to work with them and work through them and identify some of these things. So that's really interesting to see because you were talking about how the soul is different, and
mhm,
that's where your personal spin on these things is. And so, the astrology component is just one component of what an individual is made out of. Then we have all of these other layers of information that we add on top of that to get a complete picture. But your astrological breakdown is, as you say, the energetic DNA part. So it does help
mhm,
to
mhm.
understand, but there are other levels to add to that, which leads me to a question that I had about you personally, because you reveal in the books that you are a Sagittarius sun
Yes.
sign, right?
Yep.
Okay, very cool. So I'm a Leo, as you know,
Yep.
so fellow fire sign. So there might be some similarities in that
Oh yeah.
regard. But wondering how your Sagittarius placement has shown up in your own craft and your own practice. And I imagine there's much more information in the Sagittarius sun sign
Mhm.
book. So you guys should
Sure.
definitely check that out. But for folks who haven't gotten a hold of it just yet, what has it been like being not just a witch, but a Sagittarius witch?
Yeah, and I'm going to say for full disclosure, my rising is also Sag.
Okay.
My moon is in Scorpio, and my Mercury and my Venus and my Saturn are also in Sag. So there's a whole lot of Sag going on.
Wow.
Whole
Yeah.
lot going on.
Wow. Okay.
All right. Okay. One of the things that Sag that shows up in my life is the following, and I'm going to actually use the actual image of the Centaur for a second, and it's really three levels of self. You can think of the horse part with the four legs. That's actually the four elements in about being connected to the planet. It's your primal self. It's your animal self. Then there's the part that's the human being, right, on the centaur, and that's the part that's logical and rational and observing the world. Then you've got that arrow. Oh, that's the arrow of aspiration aimed at spirit, aimed at the heavens, aimed at the sky. So when a Sag is doing all three of them together, like they're acknowledging their primal animal self and their groundedness and connectedness to the earth, they're accepting that this is their package deal of personality and life history and stuff, and they have aspiration and they're paying attention to that spark of that star ahead. They do good. And if you look at it mythologically, If you look at in mythology, most centaurs are assholes. Most of the stories about centaurs are not good stories.
Yeah, I
Now,
never really
you've
thought
got
about
you've got
that.
at the very least, people have encountered the Percy Jackson stuff. So there's the centaur Chiron, who's the teacher, schoolmaster guy. Well, Chiron is an example of one of the evolved or good ones. Because here's the thing: if a Sag doesn't have all three of those things in harmony within themselves, and that's been my case a couple times in my life, then your life really goes off the rails. Because
Mm.
when the animal part takes off, then that's the Sag that. And I will freely admit that in my 20s, I was out at the clubs at least 4 nights a week. So,
Hello.
but my point is, and if the Sag gets too focused on the human part, then they can become really full of themselves and really pompous and pretentious. And I mean, but if they get focused just on the star of aspiration and the arrow and all that stuff, then they actually can't hold down a job.
Mm.
They may collect, like the eternal student thing is very popular among Sages.
Mm.
And that's okay as long as you're actually still keeping grounded. And so the point is, for me, a couple of times I had to really, really look at my life and go, what do I need to be all the parts of me that are
Yeah.
represented there? And I have a friend that it's always busting me for one reason or another. And he, for Yule, one of the things he got me was a T-shirt that had a glass on it, and it was like half filled with water, but then above it it said O2, N2, and basically, so you think the glass is always full, because I
Mhm.
do think the glass is always full. So
Right.
Sag can be way optimistic, which is an awesome thing. And also, Sages are like in my life are like, and I've been through a lot of crap.
Mm.
Weevils wobble, but they don't fall down. I mean, Sages are really good at bouncing back, and
Yeah.
that's by the way, that's because it's mutable fire. Um, Leo's got fixed fire, which three modalities: cardinal, fixed, mutable. Fixed modalities like the sun; it's going to shine no matter what. It's always going to come up and shine. Sag is mutable fire; it can burn down until it's just tiny little red ember, or it can be you can tend it and it grows up to be this giant column of flame reaching the heavens. So it's a very changeable fire. But if you're not constantly tending it, it goes off the rails.
Right.
So I have to be really, really careful. Honestly, I also have like my chart is almost the same as one of my friends' charts, and that friend happens to be the brother of one of my coven mates from years ago.
Mm.
We were born just a couple hours apart, same day. There's a lot that's some things are different, obviously, because he was born in New Jersey and I was born in Cuba, and a couple hours difference. But there's a lot that's the same. And he grew up to be a soldier of fortune, literally a mercenary.
Wow.
So here's the thing: both of us have big anger and warrior placements in our chart.
Mhm.
So I chose, and I'm going to say it's choice, because if I allow myself to go crazy, the fire goes crazy, and you don't want you. All fire signs have to be careful when their fire gets way raging out of
Yeah.
control. That's just a fire sign thing. It is. Rage and anger plays differently depending upon your sign, but the families like the fire signs are different from the water sign. Anyway, so but I chose to grow up to be a warrior of a different kind, and I've been involved in a lot of different uh, movements and protests, and I've done a lot of stuff. But so I chose to do the warrior thing in a different way
Mhm.
because, like I said, it's a different soul driving it. But here's the part that Sag energy is. I'm going to say I like this especially about Sag energy. Sag when the Sag if Sag is not acting like an asshole and is actually balanced,
Yeah.
then they're going to go, that's different, or it's from a different culture. I love it. I want to know more. So Sages tend to have a default of xenophilia instead of
Mm.
xenophobia. If it's
Right.
something different, oh, I want to know more about it. Tell me more, as opposed to that's different. It's
I'm
got to be
afraid of
wrong,
that. Yeah.
or it's got to be wrong, or
Right.
or it's evil, or So Sages tend to. That's one of the reasons why Sag is associated a lot with travel.
Mhm.
And if you have the means for actual physical travel, great. But if not, then a Sag will spend a lot of time reading and discovering about every other thing on the planet, whether it's ideas or cultures or whatever. And I am a bit of a generalist when it comes to my magic. I mean, I have my specialties, though I will plead the following. I'm 65, which meant over the years I've collected a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I can say that this is when I was like so totally hyper focused on one thing, and then hyper focused on another, and hyper focused on another. So the deal is, Sagittarius tend to want to know a little bit about everything, and if they live long enough and don't blow themselves up, they eventually go back and do some more so they get good at something.
Yeah. It's maybe a later in life expertise, but a lot of information collected along the way.
Unless, and I always make the exception, you don't know what kind of soul, because once in a while a child prodigy spirit shows up in somebody, and those show up in all the signs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clearly they're remembering more from before than I am.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind me saying, folks tuning into the podcast won't be able to enjoy this, but maybe this will be another reason for you guys to subscribe to the Beyond BronxWitch YouTube channel and watch these behind the scenes tapings, because I think you just said that you were 65, which I would not have guessed by a long shot. And I don't know if you have noticed this, but witches do not ever seem to look their age. And I joke with people because I get the same, I'm going to be 40 soon. And I don't think that most people think that when they first look at me. And I always joke, but I'm not joking. I always say it's the witchcraft. But I really don't think it's a joke, because I don't think I've ever met a witch that actually looks their age. There's something about what we do that seems to foster a very youthful, or almost timeless, maybe is the better word, kind of energy. So it's not just that we don't look our ages, we don't necessarily sound or feel like our ages either. And so it's always a surprise to me. I don't know if you've noticed that, but
actually, no, I have noticed that a lot. I mean, though I will say I'm gonna be, so a lot of them act and look younger than their chronological age. That has been my experience. There are also some that look way older.
Yes.
There's like this split. If you take the bell-shaped curve, it's kind of like there's two humps. It's a split group, because I think that the two things happen. Moving the energy, like you were talking about, absolutely changes how things go. And also, most of us are trying to make peace with all our different parts of self, all different bits and bobs. And I think that when you are not at war with yourself, and that your body is happier, which makes a difference, right? And also, people that are involved in witchcraft tend to be more curious about things. Not all, and it's not 100%, but we're talking in averages, right? Well, that means that you don't drop out of connection with the world as fast as other people in your same age group. Now, I also say that so that you're just the interests that you have are going to make you not immediately drop out, so that you no longer can keep up with new ideas in politics or music or the world, or so you're more likely to be engaged with the world regardless of what your age is. And that makes you come across more youthful, because you haven't started to rot on the vine. Honestly, you're still muted.
Thanks. You're more engaged with like what's happening in the now, I guess. And so there's a point, I guess, for most people where they kind of stop paying attention maybe to what's going on right now, and get kind of stuck in just doing things the way that they always have, because it's easier, they're more comfortable with it. But that can kind of date you, because it means that you perhaps are not as used to or familiar with newer ways of thought or technology, or even manner of dress, like what's in fashion at the moment, or things like that. So that's a very interesting way of looking at how that happens.
I also have a thing that I've been doing for quite a long time now, and that is, and this is arbitrary, but this is what I started. If the year ends in 5 or 0, it's a special year. So here's what I do. Like 2025 is this year's going fast. So 25 is going to be right on top of us soon.
Right.
So in years that end with 5 or 0, which basically every 5 years, I intentionally make a point of listening to a lot of music that I've never heard before,
Mm.
of tuning in and watching online or in print or whatever, different news sources that I'd never read before or listened to before. I will intentionally lurk and just read, not comment on different groups in different social media settings, just because I want to hear, or I'll read biographies of people that come from some life background that is totally outside of my realm of knowledge, just as a way of hitting the reset button every 5 years so that I don't completely fall out of the loop.
Mm. That is great. That's a really great tip, that I will take to heart and execute that as well, because my mother's in her 80s and we're trying to get her to learn how to use her iPhone. And if we had this approach, it probably wouldn't be rocket science the way it seems to be. So
Right?
that's amazing. Yeah, we've gotten her to the point where she can call back a FaceTime, but she hasn't figured out how to answer it. So she has to let you go to voicemail and then she'll call you back. So that's a really, Nisi's taking notes. I agree. That's a really great tip, because I've gotten to see that in my mother, and I don't want that for myself. I do want to keep up with what's going on, and even at 38, I already finding myself being like, oh, these kids and their TikTok and their raunchy music, and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on, don't lose touch.
And I'm going to say, when we were young, our music was raunchy.
Yes.
by other people's perspective.
No, very much so. Me and my friends were I went to a conference in LA last week, and I got to see TLC, the girl band, perform, which was amazing. That was a beautiful throwback to my childhood. And but they had a couple of songs that I was like, I was definitely singing this at the top of my lungs at 10 years old, and I don't know what I knew about red light specials.
I don't know what I was saying when I was singing and dancing to Push It Real Good.
Yeah, exactly. What a classic. Yeah, we have to remember that. Like, we were all screaming that at the top of our lungs, guys. Let's not judge. I love that so much. I think this is a perfect time for us to take a quick little commercial break. If you don't mind, I'm going to send this to commercial. So I always encourage people to refill their teas. Go to the Little Witch's room, stretch out. I'm going to read a few things for our audience, and we will be back in just a moment with more from Ivo Dominguez Jr., talking all about how we can all be better Zodiac witches. All right, guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I'm going to share some information with you in case you don't know. Are you ready to level up from baby witch to better witch? Enroll in the BetterWitch Magic Intensive Coaching Program. Unveil the power of self-realization, meditation, rituals, and more. Elevate your practice with live classes and one-on-one sessions with me, Alysha Kravetz. Plus, enjoy exclusive perks, including almost $1,000 in savings on magical products and services. And get your own copy of the Better Witch Magic Intensive Kit, which contains over $200 worth of tools and goodies to help you go from baby witch to better witch in just 6 months. Don't miss your chance to become a better witch. Enrollment for the fall semester is now open, and you can learn more at bronxwitch.com/coaching. All right, folks. All right. A reminder to everybody who is watching, especially if you can't stick around to the end, we will be taking questions in just a little bit. So make sure to drop your questions. You can leave them in the chat, or if you're watching on YouTube, at the top of the chat is a Q&A box. You can put your questions in to make sure that we don't miss them. All right, and we're going to welcome Evo back from the commercial break. Thank you for being back with us, Evo. And I wanted to get into the second half of our conversation with a little bit of a passage reading, if you don't mind.
Awesome.
These are like my masterpiece theater moments. But I wanted to share this, and this is coming from Leo Witch, everyone. Which we have copies of here in the shop. So definitely check that out. But on page 5, you mention astrology can be used for magic, divination, personal development, and more. No matter what the purpose, your understanding of astrology will change over time as your life unfolds and your experience and self knowledge broaden. You will probably return to this book several times as you find opportunities to use more of the insights and methods. This may seem like strange advice to find in a book for the Leo witch, but remember, you are more than a Leo witch. In the process of claiming the identity of being a witch, it is common to want to have a clear and firm definition of who you are. Sometimes this means over identifying with a category, such as water witch, herb witch, crystal witch, kitchen witch, and so on. It is useful to become aware of the affinities you have so long as you do not limit and bind yourself to being less than you are. The best use for this book is to uncover all of the parts of you that are Leo so you can integrate them well. The finest witches I know have well developed specialties, but also are well rounded in their knowledge and practices.
Mhm.
And I thought that was such an important thing to include because I do find that that's a really easy habit to fall into, particularly I think for us when we are newer witches, because we might be searching for actually identity and
Right.
searching for a place. I think perhaps maybe especially if we are leaving other religions or traditions and feeling kind of like that void when it's like, okay, well, am I a nothing? I once was a Muslim, or I once was a Christian, or I once was an atheist, and now am I not those things? And what am I? And that can be helpful to some extent, but ultimately might be really limiting in the long run. And a lot of the material that you find online and in books almost kind of encourages that limitation, or encourages us to identify with being a type of witch
Mhm.
or not. And it's more advantageous, I think, to think outside of those boxes, but perhaps a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
And so I was hoping you could speak a little bit to that, why you felt it important to include that notation about not being too rooted in this idea that you are a Leo witch or a Libra witch, but rather allowing it to inform you
Mhm.
as you move forward as a witch practitioner, but not to kind of pigeonhole you into a type. What made you want to kind of give us that disclaimer?
I think that this is just my opinion, my perspective. I always
Yeah.
have to say it that way, which means I
Yeah.
don't expect
That's what we're here
anybody
for.
else to agree or adopt anything I say ever.
Mhm.
But for me, a witch that is good at being a witch is also flexible and adaptable. And if you're doing witchcraft for purposes, not just spiritual development, and I'm not making light of that, but to actually have an impact on something, whether it's healing or a new apartment or whatever. If you're trying to actually use it as part of your work in life, then you need to have enough adaptability, enough flexibility, and a broad enough concept of who you are. The other bit is that when we adopt any identity too strongly as becoming a limited thing, because which in my head is huge and vast and as full of possibilities. But when you start narrowing it down, I'll compare it to a bunch of silly images. It's like those silly guys that you see coming out of the gym with the pencil legs and these giant biceps and big chests. It's like they don't have they've not developed themselves evenly. Or
Someone was
people,
skipping leg day.
yeah, or people that that you kind of like want to chew your leg off and escape from when you're trapped next to them at a party because they've been talking about the same topic for the last hour. My point is, witches are like the identity of witch should be like any other identity that you have, full, flexible, and connected to all the things that you need in your life and in yourself. Now, if you had, let's say, back to this party, let's say that, I wander around and maybe this, and I've used this example for other things. I have a conversation with somebody and they say, oh, and we talk astrology for 10 minutes. So they walk away. Oh, Evo's all about astrology. Up. Over here, I talk to somebody and we talk about herbs for 10 minutes. So they walk away. Evo's all into herb stuff. He's a green witch kind of guy. And I also love to cook, and I view cooking as magic. And maybe I'm sharing recipes with somebody. So each of those people is going to walk away and say Evo is and they'll have a different name for what kind of witch I am. The bottom line is that you should be legion. I'm going to throw in you should be 1,001 different faces, just like we view the divine to have 1,001 faces. And if we're small images of the divine, then we should have 1,001 faces and 1,001 ways of adjusting to the world. So, however, here's the part that's real, and I'm not going to be a downer on this. So, why is it that people do this? That they pigeonhole themselves and they want to grab something so tight? You know what? We all did it when we were adolescents. We try on different identities and we claim it fully to make it really real so that we feel it real. And then we move on to the next one. Because, any time in our life that we are in the process of transitioning in any sense, we have to work really hard to fully experience the identity so that we can then integrate it and then move on to the next layer and the next layer, going back to the onion suggestion that you said, Ellie, because the bottom line is that we are so many things. But if you recognize I'm doing this just so that I can feel it completely, in the same way that in some relaxation exercises, you completely tense a muscle and completely relax it and move through the body doing that, or it makes sense to do a thing at a time. Just don't get stuck being a one-trick pony, that's the only thing that they do, or that, oh, I can't do that kind of magic. I'm a water witch. I'm not good at fire. Well, let me tell you something. You're a witch first. If you look at my birth chart, I'm holding up my imaginary birth chart, I have 0 goose egg air in my chart. Not a bit of air. And as everybody can tell, I'm hard to shut up. So here's the way it works. If you have nothing of something in your chart, it can play 2 ways. Either I would be a person, my clone, my doppelganger, who's the soldier of fortune guy, is a person of very few words. Here's the thing. But because I don't have any air in my chart, and the universe hates a vacuum, and I'm a witch, so I can summon things. So I summon air from the universe, and now I have more air than if I had air planets.
Yeah.
Because it's not boundaried and it's not limited. But if you don't have something in your chart, you can call it. You can summon it. You can ask for spirits to help you. You don't have to do it all yourself, right?
Right.
So I want people to fully understand what it is to be their sun sign so they can integrate it and then keep on moving. And ultimately, hopefully learn about all the signs, because all of them are in you, and you deal with other human beings that are those signs.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No. I thank you for that, because I think that's a really important thing to think about, that like the things that you are not in a lot of ways are just as significant as the things that you are.
Right.
Because I can't help but think about the example of this business. I'm sitting in the relax room in BronxWitch HeadQuarters, which, by the way, is available for reservation, folks. So if you want to record your podcast here too, you can do that. But this business, one of the best things that ever happened, shout out to Lauren Berg, who's one of our community members who gifted this to me, but I had an astrological birth chart pulled for the business, which was incredibly helpful.
Yep.
Because one of the areas of weakness or lack for the business was earth. There was lots of fire, air, and water, but there was almost no earth. There was no grounding. There were no placements with earth signs, no planets with Earth zodiacs, and it was like, oh, well, what does that mean? Well, it meant that the best fits for this business were Earth signs. And the first two shop witches that we had here on a regular basis was Alexis, who's a
Mm-hmm.
Virgo, and
Mm-hmm.
Chelsea, who's a Taurus.
Yep.
And that was exactly what we needed. It was what I personally needed, but it was also what the business needed in order to feel really well balanced.
Yeah.
And that was incredibly helpful. And knowing what we didn't have was a tool, and just as much as knowing all the things that we were, because that guided me in my hiring, and it guided me in figuring out what personalities or what particular traits would work well here, so that it wasn't just a ton of fire raging all the time or what have you. I love that you point that out, that what you are is a stepping stone,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just one of the stepping stones, and the things that you are not things to be ignored, or indications that you're not going to be able to do something, but
Mm-hmm.
rather will inform how you will be
Oh,
able
yeah.
to do that thing, because maybe you will need the assistance of an herb or a crystal,
Right.
or maybe you will need to call on the help of certain folks with other placements that balance you out, whatever it is that you are working on. So that's really great advice. Yeah, so thank you so much for that. Now, you had mentioned that there's so much to learn. It astrology is definitely a science
Mm-hmm.
all on its own. It's hard to compare it to other things. As someone who studies herbalism, I can tell you that can take a lifetime. Really, any of these areas of knowledge and thought can take an entire lifetime
Mm-hmm.
to learn. We do like to help new witches go about their journeys a little bit easier by learning from ours. So, if you could start again, if you can imagine such a thing, just learning about astrology, you just figured out what a sun sign was yesterday, and you just discovered that you're a Sagittarius. How might you go about learning about astrology and incorporating it into your craft a little bit differently, if you would do anything differently?
Oh, I would. I would. Um, and I'm going to say that you figure out what your way of learning or absorbing is, because everybody's going to be different that way. But here's what I would do differently. And I will say that the very first thing that got me to take astrology seriously was um, uh, my best friend in high school gifted me with an astrological calendar, and that was in 1974. And I hung it up on the wall, and I thought it was cool looking. And I've sort of halfway paid attention to it, read the information in the back and the front. Here's what I wish I had done. I would have, because I like many teenagers, I sort of had a journal at the time, sort of. It was, I won't call it a diary because I didn't do it every day, and not, but I would have, if I'd known better, um, paid attention to every week if there was any kind of planetary alignment going on, and see if it showed up any way at all in any form in my life. I would have paid attention to the every 2.5 days or so, the moon goes from one sign or another, and I would have paid attention of how are my teachers behaving at those days? What was the mood in my homeroom? Because I was in high school. So I'm saying is that I would have made the effort of learning astrology, because I eventually had a teacher and read the books and had an actual physical teacher that taught me astrology. But man, would I have been better off if I had just taken a year of observation with that first calendar of how those things actually played out every day or every week or over the course. And by then, it's kind of like a tuning to the energy. In the same way that you probably have spent time with a candle in front of you, or a bowl of water, or a crystal in front of you to tune in, or the window open and the breeze blowing to tune into one of the elements, I would have just attuned my senses, my psychic senses, to what does it feel like when I'm swimming in the energy of that and that and that. And that would have given me a more organic and built-in understanding long before I started looking at tables and charts and getting out my calculator and graph paper and doing all those things for creating charts and whatnot. In the olden days, that was pre-computer when I first started. So so I would say that would be my first thing, and it's a good idea for anybody. But honestly, I learn better if I see how it plays in the world.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that's probably like maybe the most helpful way to go about learning anything,
Mhm.
is looking for your real life like reference points,
Mhm.
because memorization can be helpful and will get you so far, but actually seeing these things show up is big, because that's really how it happened for me, but it was accidental. It was
Mm.
forced. I wasn't, even though I was a witch already at this time, I started bartending when I was about 18. And astrology wasn't a big part of my practice at this point. It was just sort of like, try to remember not to forget the full moons kind of thing. And when you're bartending, though, there is, and this might be different in different places, but at least in New York, everybody always talks about the full moon and how weird it is. And
Mhm.
we are always like, oh boy, here we go. It's the full moon. Let's see what's
Mhm.
going to happen on this shift. And things would always be kind of wacky, not necessarily bad, but just
No.
the unexpected. If it was
Mhm.
going to happen, seemed to always happen on the full moon.
Mhm.
Customers that you weren't expecting, your
Mhm.
regulars not showing up, and things just being different. And I noticed within myself a tendency to have a hard time to keep control of my emotions. And if I was going to have a night where I got into an argument with a customer or something really pissed me off, it was going to be a full moon night. And that made me say, like, gosh, I keep seeing the impact of this whole full moon thing on my life. Maybe there's something I could do to make it
Mhm.
not so stressful for me.
Mhm.
And that's when I started looking at, what the different signs of the full moon can mean, and started paying attention and started getting a Llewellyn calendar so that I could be ready. And I started wearing a moonstone
Mhm.
always on full moon nights, and doing that did wonders
Mhm.
for my emotional balance and my ability to roll with the punches.
Right.
Not only psychologically, because I knew it was coming and I was ready and I could do
Mhm.
things like make sure I got a better night's rest and that I wasn't scrambling out the door, and that I made sure I had all my tools with me, and that I did everything, control the controllables, basically, that I
Sure.
did everything that I could do to make the night a little easier, because I knew that there were things I couldn't control that were going to happen. But then also wearing a crystal that helped me to emotionally kind of just keep myself in check and energetically prepare
Mhm.
myself for what
Mhm.
I was going to experience. So I sort of accidentally fell into
A rhythm.
a rhythm of paying attention to what was
Yeah.
happening astrologically, because I worked this job that was at night, and it was just so obvious that something was going on that had nothing to do with the staff. And from there, then that sparked my curiosity to be like, well, what else
What's going
is
on?
going on? Like, well, what else could I be paying attention to? And then that took me down the path of just trying to educate myself as much as I can. But there's no way to know it all. I think, that's why some people dedicate their whole lives to it, because it really is something you can spend your whole life studying. So for the new witch, for the witch that wants to be in alignment with
Mhm.
what's happening in the cosmos, but isn't necessarily trying to, study it for the rest of their lives, I think your approach is really spot on. Get a basic calendar
Mhm.
and just pay attention to the different transits, whether it's of one planet or just
Mhm.
generally what's happening of
Right.
note in the week, and just see what
Mhm.
happens. If
Mhm.
anything, if you feel any shifts, if you feel any changes, I learned through that experience that I'm very sensitive to the moon. But I also learned while kind of going on the same exercise with other planetary transits, that I'm not as sensitive to other things. I don't see as big of a difference in my life or my day or how people behave when other things are going on. So now I know that, and I pay attention to what the moon is doing, and I don't need to memorize, every single thing or know where the entire cosmos are right now. But I do know that if I take note of what's happening with the moon, I'm going to have a generally good idea of how I might feel or what experiences might pop up for me. And that allows me to go with the flow rather than, kind of fighting against it or swimming upstream energetically. So I love that.
I'm going to compare it to like herbalism for a second. Like you can study for your entire life and just scratch the surface with herbalism. There's just so much, right? And yet, if you take some classes and you pay attention, you can learn enough so that the next time you have a sore throat or the next time you need to do purification bath or the next time you can do something for yourself or for your family or your friends, right?
Right.
And I'm going to suggest that astrology does not need to be the big bad wolf. It can't be, it's not this big. And by the way, you don't need math anymore to do astrology. When I started, you had to because we didn't have computers to calculate the charts, right? So you can't even use the math excuse anymore. No, astrology's got too much math. Yeah, there is some if you want to be an astrologer, but you can learn enough about astrology to make useful choices in your rituals, make useful choices about gems that work with your energy in different ways. So that it's a question of learning enough astrology for your intended uses. You don't have to prove anything to anybody, and you don't have to hang a shingle and say, I'm going to be an astrologer. But so it's doable as long as you don't have the idea that you have to become an astrologer to use astrology.
Yes, I love that. Notes, guys, you don't have to become an astrologer to use astrology, which is so great.
Think of it as
So
hedge astrology.
what's that?
Think of it as hedge astrology.
Yeah, right, exactly. Just get the edges, get what you need. I love that very much. So this is a great time for us to now take any questions from you guys. If you don't mind hanging out for a few more minutes, Evo,
I
to
don't mind.
grab a couple of questions from folks. Thank you so much. So if you haven't already dropped your questions into the Q&A box, please definitely go ahead and do so. And you can also drop them in the chat. I'll be taking a look at that too. We'll try to make sure we don't miss anybody. Podcast listeners, one of the perks of subscribing to my YouTube channel, Beyond BronxWitch, is you get to watch the live behind the scenes tapings of each episode, and you get to participate in these Q&As. So if you want to be live in the room and be able to get your questions answered by the episode's guest co-hosts, you definitely want to head over to YouTube and subscribe to the Beyond BronxWitch channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we go live with our amazing guest co-hosts. So let me take a look and see if we've got some questions. I know we have one in the chat. Let me check the Q&A box here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take one of the questions that we had earlier in the chat from Jolie Cleary, who asks, do animals have astrological influences as well, or is it different because it's a different soul type? And they are asking because they've always been curious about differences in puppies from a same litter that are born within minutes of each other. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, well, it's complicated, but I'll compress it. How about this? You can look up lists of animals and which sign or planets are associated with them. So for example, I'm going to go, you said puppies, and I have 3 dogs, so I'm going to go there first. Dogs and wolves are ruled by the moon. Period. So the moon has a greater impact on them, so I pay attention to as much, if not more, where was the moon when that puppy was born, as opposed to the moon sign, the sun sign, though it's important as well. They are different soul types. They are different beings than us. They also live at a faster clip than we do. They do their whole life in a shorter span. So if somebody wanted to, and maybe somebody is, and we'll know in a couple of decades, there probably could be an entire different branch of astrology designed to look at the charts for animals. But one of the things that you have to change is the calculations for how fast that animal's lifespan is. For example, you know the deal about how the quote unquote average lifespan for human beings is around 72? Okay, that actually has an astrological meaning because it takes 72 years for the precession of the Earth to move click 1 degree. So the change of the ages as we go from the ages of Pisces to Aquarius, every 72 years is one click of that 360-degree pattern. So uh, 29 days is the moon cycle. 29 years is the length for Saturn to go around one time around the sun. So there's things about human, like in astrology, you're not considered an adult until your Saturn return, which is somewhere around 28 to 31, depending upon. So that there's a different time clock. But what may be minutes apart for those puppies, maybe if we had more knowledge about the right way to cast their charts would be radically different, because for them, minutes are not the same as our minutes. You know what I'm saying? In the same way that if we ever, I hope Elon Musk doesn't do it, because I hate him. There are very few things that I hate, but he's an asshole. And he's wrong-headed in so many, and his money comes from his family money of emeralds mined in South Africa. So he's not a good person. Anyway, but let's say that we do have colonies on Mars, put there by people that are reasonable people. Once human beings start getting born on Mars, day one begins, and astrologers have to begin to look at what happens over the course of that child's life and those children's life to figure out how to cast a chart with Mars as the center and the Earth as being one of the planets in the sky. There will be a new astrology for every location we are elsewhere and for different types beings here. Now, I will say that if you have a question about an animal, if there is a planet that is its traditional ruler, what it's doing in the heavens is going to have a bigger impact. If there's a sign that is strongly associated with that animal, when the moon is in that sign, it will also have an impact. So that's the first starting point. In the same way that the energy bodies aren't exactly the same in animals as they are in humans. And what's being affected by the movement of the planets, it's not the physical objects, it's the auras of those planets moving through the solar system and changing the shape of space-time and the energy that we're reacting to. Anyway.
Right. Wow. Oh my God, that's fascinating. I don't know why I thought that would be a more like easily digestible idea. It's like, yeah, your puppy was born on, August 1st, so he's a Leo. But like actually you're looking at it kind of it would show up that way, but to really get into it, we have to kind of take into account that difference of how time moves
for them,
for an animal versus how it moves for us, which is another level that we maybe haven't gotten to just yet, to like really kind of iron out how to quantify that, so that we can pull the charts for dogs and pull the charts for cats and have it be adjusted accordingly for how time moves for them. That's really fascinating to think about. Maybe someone in our audience will be the one to crack the codes on that and give us some type of standardized way to look at the charts of our animal friends. That's really awesome. Thank you for that question. We have another question coming in, and this is from Kittieri, which I know I'm saying it wrong, but I got the okay to say it, Kittieri. And the question here is, I'm a Pisces and have always felt an affinity for animals and plants. Does that go with my sign? I'm learning herbalism. So I guess they're asking whether or not their interest in animals and plants is something typical of a Pisces, and if that's something that is being sort of typical of Pisces signs.
So let's look at it this way. Each of the 12 signs is a particular style of consciousness, a particular style of approaching the world. So you will find, just like you will find people that have interest in animals and plants in every sign. But here's how it plays differently. If you're a Pisces, then you're going to feel a compassion, a empathy, an overlap of energy with the plants and with the animals. So you're going to feel them in a different way that I love animals and plants, but I got to tell you, when I tune into plants and animals, I'm seeing and feeling the fire of their energy. I'm seeing the light of their energy, as opposed so that And if you were Virgo, shout out to Virgos. They are mutable Earth, so they may have 1,001 ways to connect with the process of how that Earth as a planet, or that Earth as an animal lives, the process of its physiology. This is why Virgos are really big into health stuff, is because they tune into that kind of stuff, because it's
Yeah.
mutable Earth. So
Our
I'm
shop witch, Alexis, is an
a
energy
Virgo.
healer, and
Yeah,
so
there you
she
go.
focuses on health and from the perspective of astrology and crystals. She works with
Yeah.
extensively.
So what I'm going to say is that, once again, it's not about being limited, but knowing your sun sign is going to show you the default style of how you reach out to interact with the thing. But it doesn't limit you to, is it weird that I'm into plants and animals? No, but every sign will do it a different way.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. That's fantastic. And thank you so much for your questions, Jolie and Kitieri. I really appreciate it. I think those are all of the questions. I think we have one more in here, if you don't mind. Okay, awesome. Cecilia asked, I was born on November 11th as a Scorpio. My first name is guided by the number 11. I'm wondering what that is about, numbers and all. So I guess the question here is that a coincidence, or have you seen folks having similar birth dates as their, maybe name numbers, if they're using some type of chart to break down the numerical value of their names? Have you seen any overlap with things like that?
So, yeah, kind of. Here's what I'm going to say. Not everybody's going to have that overlap where you're going to find a thing in your birth date and your name numerology. And so what I'm going to say is that if I'm going to give you another rule of three, and it's not the overstated threefold law, blah blah blah, which actually, even back then in the 70s, we didn't actually think of it literally threefold. Anyway,
Right.
but there's an astrological threefold law, and that is, if I make a conclusion, if I can't find three places in the chart that support it, then I don't say it. I don't believe it. If you find three different things that three different systems that show up and say, wink, look in the same direction, then look in that direction, see what's going on there, so that not everybody's chart and birth date and number are going to play out that way. But whatever combination of things you use, and we all use lots of different systems of divination and self-understanding. But if I see three things that all line up and are giving me the same message, then I go, I got to pay extra attention. Somehow that is particular to what's going on in my life at that moment, or maybe my life in general. So I pay attention to what that is for you. Yes, I've seen times when people's numbers line up that way, but it's not common, but it's also not unknown.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, and I have that with the number 5. I was just thinking of not born on the 5th date, but my magical number, as it will, or
Yeah.
life path number. People use different terms
Right.
for these things, but all of the numbers in my birth date taken together give me a 5. But so do the name that I was assigned with that birth, and my lucky number is a Leo. One of them is 5, and so there are numerous points in sort of my
Being aimed
makeup
at that
that
direction.
point to the number 5. So that's definitely really good advice. So I would do more digging, Cecilia, into the other layers of yourself to see if the number 11 shows up in some other spaces, and then perhaps some diving into what the number 11 numerologically might mean, what it might mean astrologically, and things of that nature. Might reveal a lot.
I'm going to throw in one other weird thing with the number 11, because if you look at the number 11, imagine that you've got the number 1 and you're holding it up to a mirror, and now you've got a reflection, so you've got the number 11.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a Scorpio and you've got a thing going on with 11, what kind of connection or work do you do with things that are on the other side? Because I mean, the first image for me that came up with 11 and Scorpio as well, Scorpios tend, not all, but Scorpios have a tendency to be connected to the dead, or to the spirits, or to the other realms beyond this one. So, is that something that's already part of what your work is about, or is that something that you're being aimed at, because that is one of the 11 things?
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting for sure. I think 11 is also considered a master number in some numerological systems. And that is almost like being a number one amplified, somebody that
Mhm.
is a leader, but perhaps on both sides, somebody who can kind of take charge in the seen world and in the unseen world. So I bet you didn't think you were getting an astrology reading today, Cecilia. I would definitely keep diving into that because that's really cool. That is fantastic. I want to thank everybody for their incredible questions. And I want to remind everyone that if you want to get your question answered by our guest co host of the day, then you are definitely going to want to be in the stream room. You can follow on YouTube or you can join our virtual coven. Either way, you will get access to these live streams. So, definitely consider doing so. So that has been all of our questions that came through and all of the topics and things that I wanted to discuss with you, Ivo. But before we let you go, I'm wondering if you can let folks know where they can find more info from you and information about maybe projects or things that you have coming up next.
Honestly, go to my website, evodominguezjr.com, my whole name.
Mhm.
I list where I'm teaching. There's also go digging in it because there's also a bunch of recorded chants and path workings there. That's free content that you can listen to as well. But my schedule's there. There's also a link to sign up for an email newsletter, which I won't drown you with stuff. I don't send them out often, but I'm pretty easy to track down.
Beautiful. Yes, that's wonderful. So just to repeat that, guys, Ivo Dominguez Jr., full name written out.com is
Yeah.
the website. That's going to be your best place to go to keep in touch with Ivo, to learn more, and to find out about anything that Ivo is working on next. And I think are we 9 books into the Sun Sign series
Yeah,
now?
we
Just maybe
are.
3
And
more to go?
June, July, August, the last 3 will be out. So all 12 will be out. And I'm gonna
Exciting.
one thing we didn't have time to touch on,
Yeah.
the 12 signs are 12 spirits.
Hmm.
They, whether they started that way, they became that because for generations and generations, we have named them, we have seen them, we've visualized them, we've called upon them, we've cursed them. Uh, they are so from an animistic perspective, and consider calling on them as spirits when you need help with doing something, like when you need some help with the next seance you're doing. Maybe you want to call on the power of Scorpio or the power of Pisces. Maybe you're going to call on that Virgo organizing energy the next time you need. My point is, these are spiritual forces in and of themselves, and as witches,
Right.
spirits are our friends.
Right, right. And that reminds me of something Corey Thomas Hutchison reminded us of, which is that magic really is just all about relationships.
Yes.
We're making relationships with different vibrations, different frequencies, and your zodiac placements are just another
Mhm.
world of vibrations for you to build relationships with. So I think that's a perfect thing to leave on. And thank you so much for making sure that we got that in. That's a really important gem, I think, for all of us to take with us. So I want to thank you so much, Ivo, for being with us today. This was an incredible chat. I know that I have learned a lot about the topic of being a better zodiac witch, and I'm incredibly grateful to you for the time that you've shared with us, because when we know better, we witch better. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was awesome.
All right. Yay! Okay, that is the end of our
Good.
taping.
It was a lot of fun.
Woohoo! Thank you so much for being here. That was such a great chat, really wonderful. And I think, rounding it out with that reminder that we're dealing with spirits, that these are all
Right.
vibrations for us, is an
Right.
important thing for all of us to take away. So thank you so, so much for that. So the next step here is, as I said, you'll get an email from me as soon as the podcast version of this is available. But this behind the scenes taping is available now on the Beyond BronxWitch YouTube channel. If you want to give it a watch over, or if you want to refer it to anybody, Certainly appreciate you sharing it with those that you know. And then I'm going to remove you from the studio here so you can get back to your day. And I just ask, if you don't mind, please do not close your browser or turn off your computer just yet. Yeah, just give it a second to finish uploading. But it's just the audio, so it should only take a few minutes. I think you'll get a green check or something like that when it's good to go.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that so much.
A lot of fun, and sooner or later we'll meet in person.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it very, very much. I know our paths will cross soon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
You too.
Blessed be. Okay,
Blessed
bye.
be.
All right, guys. Okay, cool. All right. Yay! Thank you guys for tuning into another episode. That was absolutely phenomenal, as I knew it would be. Ivo, as I mentioned at the start, is, obviously someone who has been a part of the Wiccan community, the pagan community, for a very long time, has lived a magical life for a very long time, and has, as a result, gotten to gain a lot of wisdom on these topics. And I think that was definitely on display here today with all of I was just like, jotting down like where to keep notes and stuff, because there was definitely a lovely collection of good information there to help us all be better witches. I'm going to go ahead and record our outro. All right. And for those of you who are heading out of the room, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for being a part of this behind the scenes taping. It was wonderful to see you all again. Thank you, witches, for tuning in to this episode of Season 3 of the Better Witch podcast. Remember, no matter where you're tuning in from, we want to know what you think about today's episode. So make sure to leave us a review wherever you are. A special thank you to our sponsors who made this episode possible. You can support this podcast by grabbing some sweet merch over in the Beyond BronxWitch merch shop, sponsoring an episode with an ad spot, or following us on Instagram at BetterWitch Podcast. Remember, witches, when we know better, we witch better. See you in the next episode, and blessed be. All right. Merry meet and merry part and merry meet again. So wonderful to see you all. And I will let you know that our last episode recording for Season 3 is going to be with Mawia Bomani, who is the author of Conjuring the Calabash. That is scheduled for May 2nd. Definitely make sure to give a listen to all of these episodes on all of the major podcast platforms. They're dropping every week until then. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day. Blessed be.